I've been asked to speak to you today about the benefits of single-sex education. Many of the arguments that I'll make apply to both boys and girls. But I'm a teacher and advisor in an all-girls school, so I'm particularly aware of the benefits of single-sex schooling for girls. Of course, I understand that choosing the right kind of education for a child is a personal choice, and I certainly respect that choice. I also recognize that there are some strong arguments against single-sex schooling and in favor of coeducation. So in the first part of my lecture, I'd like to discuss 3 drawbacks of all-girls schools. I've been asked to speak to you today about the benefits of single-sex education. Many of the arguments that I'll make apply to both boys and girls. But I'm a teacher and advisor in an all-girls school, so I'm particularly aware of the benefits of single-sex schooling for girls. Of course, I understand that choosing the right kind of education for a child is a personal choice, and I certainly respect that choice. I also recognize that there are some strong arguments against single-sex schooling and in favor of coeducation. So in the first part of my lecture, I'd like to discuss 3 drawbacks of all-girls schools. First of all, critics of all-girls schools argue that the separation of the sexes seems old-fashioned. They point out in the United States, single-sex education was much more popular at the beginning of the 20th century, before the feminist movement that began in the early 1960s. These critics say that having separate schools for boys and girls goes against the aims and the goal of feminist and liberal educators, which is to provide fairness, to make sure boys and girls have the same educational opportunities and are treated in the same way. Secondly, the critics say that single-sex schools are artificial. In single-sex schools, boys and girls are separated and can't develop the ability to interact with one another or feel comfortable in each other's company. These critics say that in single-sex schools, children never get to learn about gender differences. In coeducational settings, of course, they get to interact on a daily basis. But in single-sex schools, they not only miss out on the chance to sit in class together, but neither do they have lunch together, play sports together, or join clubs together. In other words, and this is the third drawback, single-sex schools don't offer children a smooth transition into the real world after school, the adult world, where men and women live together. In single-sex schools, boys and girls cannot become prepared for a world in which they will compete, work, play, and live together as adults. Now, definitely, these are serious arguments against separating girls from boys in school, but there are pros and cons to any situation. And in this case, I believe that the advantages of single-sex education outweigh the disadvantages. And that's why I'm in favor of all girls and all boys schools. In the second part of the lecture, I'd like to focus on the 2 main reasons why I support single-sex education for girls in particular. It values girls' unique qualities, and it helps girls develop self-confidence. The first real benefit of all-girls education is that it recognizes girls' unique qualities, the qualities that make them different from boys. What are these unique qualities? Well, I'm going to list a few. First of all, research has shown that the brain develops differently in boys and girls. Girls can often concentrate on higher-level abstract thinking about 4 years earlier than boys can, and they tend to use the areas of the brain devoted to language and emotional functioning. Furthermore, they can often work for longer periods of time. Girls enjoy collaborative learning activities, and so they work well in groups. Boys tend to be more attracted to visual, hands-on learning activities. Finally, as girls mature, they're often kind and cooperative. These qualities are valued in all girls' schools. The second benefit of single-sex education is that girls become more self-confident without the distraction of boys. In a single-sex environment, girls enjoy being leaders. They offer help to others, and they also ask for help when they need it. For example, if they don't understand a math or science concept, they'll ask for clarification. But when girls are in the same classroom as boys, they often lose their self-esteem because they have very different learning styles than boys. Boys tend to be louder. They may jump up out of their seats and wave their arms in people's faces if they know the answer to a teacher's question. If this happens, girls typically sink back in their chairs and wait for the boys to quiet down. But if there are no boys around, girls can feel free to be themselves. Now, it's true that recently girls have been doing very well in school, better than boys in many cases. Second, we have to realize that there are valid reasons for supporting coeducation, and in many cases, it comes down to personal preference. And it's also true that all girls' schools do separate girls from the real world while they're growing up. But in the real adult world, boys are the ones who set the rules of the game. And these rules don't necessarily reflect the needs or talents of girls, no matter how well they do in school. In an all-girls school, girls can become confident enough to challenge the rules. And then, perhaps, they can change the real world into a place designed to help both women and men.